feedback, especially folks making dinner, trying to put kids to bed, do homework, or I think we had a couple last time even commuting. Where I'm going to be a little bit heavier on content this time, and I'm actually going to walk through a few slides. So if you're not at a place where you can see your screen, or you're watching this later, good for you, because you'll be able to see some good content. So the big question, I'm going to start sharing my screen. The big question we're going to try to wrestle with tonight is this idea of normal, and what does it mean to help our kids walk through the experience of what normal is. And what I think the first slide is, what is normal anyways these days? What does normal mean? And you all have the privilege of your kids being on campus to some degree, so that kind of feels normal. But I think most, uh, I'll speak for us, with two kids in middle school and a second grader, we've been calibrating to what's normal constantly, even pre-COVID. What is normal? What is, constant shifts. My wife has a phrase and a question that she's asked for years. It's kind of one of her kind of famous, infamous questions. The question is this: what season are we in? And that question has helped us for years kind of take a step back and reflect on where are we at. And if you've noticed, like I have, it seems like about every 6 months, from a developmental standpoint, each one of our three kids changes relatively, kind of drastically. And so we're constantly adjusting. And we're going to talk about this idea of transition, because what I think, and Casey and I were talking just for a couple minutes before this started, there's a sense right now, and you can completely disagree, of course. There's a sense right now, though, that I have amongst my friends, and I get to work with a bunch of principals around San Diego, that there's sort of a beginning to an end, or into of a beginning, or something that's happening right now. I think with national news of vaccination coming, with there's you cannot watch any level or layer of news these days without talking about schools reopening across the country. So there's a sense that we're going back to normal, you know, whatever that means. But I'll share with you really quickly, and I might have shared this last time, but it's worth repeating. There's a week, it was the week before the shutdown. So imagine early March last year. And with our three kids, and you might be able to relate to this, with our three kids, starting, it kind of felt like the season was starting. And we're just to calibrate, we are not one of those families that has kids super involved with everything. We don't really, until our son got to be 13, we didn't do any travel teams, any private sports, that sort of thing. We weren't traveling to Yuma, Arizona on the weekends to do soccer tournaments. That's just not been our priority, not been a value to us. Nevertheless, the week before the shutdown, it was the start of, for our two girls, soccer, start for our son, baseball. We had, with our older two kids, have had a value for piano lessons for the last like 3 or 4 years. So they started up the piano lessons again. There's I think a couple things that were starting up for their church youth groups that our kids are involved with. And I remember one of our kids, I can't remember if it was the sixth grader or eighth grader, a year ago, say, "This is crazy. Like the pace that we're in. This is crazy." Every night, my wife and I kind of passing off a slice of pizza to someone in the car to go pick up that kid, and it was just good fortune if we didn't leave a kid somewhere. So I just remember that feeling of that week. And there was one point, I think it was maybe a week after the shutdown happened, after we found out that baseball wasn't happening, soccer was shut down, piano lessons weren't happening in person, school was virtual, that my wife and I turned to each other, and we just had this kind of sense of like, I don't think we could have made that. I don't really think we could have handled that next 2.5 months if things had continued. And definitely we bit off more than we could chew. But with at that point, headed into two kids being in middle school, and just school becoming more serious, and our kids being more involved, there's just a lot going on. So there's a lot going on. That's a little personal history. But I want to talk about transition, because this is, I think, going to be a helpful framework for you as parents, to think about how do you guide your kids. This is what we're trying to do through these virtual workshops, is to talk about how can we get better positioned as parents, better informed, more equipped to guide our kids through the, call it, extraordinary challenges, extraordinary situations that we all find ourselves in. So we're going to kind of zero in on transition, because what we're starting to experience is transition. We're transitioning back to a life of in-person school for everybody, a life of going to stores, and maybe even, can you imagine going to a movie theater at some point, where we're not necessarily as fearful or anxious going to places or having people over to our homes? Like, so we're transitioning back. What does that look like? And I think there's a little spoiler alert for 20 minutes from now. What does it look like for us as parents to use a transition as an opportunity to reflect on what's most important to us as families, to what's most important to us for the experiences that our kids have, so that what we're designing for them is the right stuff? Because I think, and you can feel free to throw this in the chat. I don't think I can even see it right now. So you can you can completely disagree with me. You won't hurt my feelings. I think as a culture, especially in Poway Unified, being a parent of 3 kids in Poway Unified, I could speak for this, that we are a culture, whether you fall into this or not, we're a culture that is highly busy, that highly values achievement, highly values busyness, being involved, and especially being involved in our kids' lives. So what does it look like for us to think through our priorities, to reflect on what we're headed into, and maybe even do things a little bit differently? So let me talk about transition. And a big part of this content, it's going to sound strange, but it makes perfect sense to me. A big part of this content that I'm going to share with you just the next few minutes comes from our work, my work, firsthand with about 600 Navy SEALs for the past 5-6 years, transitioning Navy SEALs who are extraordinary under pressure. They're better than anybody you can ever imagine in terms of thinking clearly in stressful moments when the pressure's high. And I'm talking about firefights. I'm talking about IED explosives coming. I mean, these men have trained to think as calmly and clearly as possible, except what they're not prepared for is a career transition to the private sector, to the civilian world. So if you want to see an ironic moment, it's to put a transitioning Navy SEAL on the spot in a career, call it informational interview or interview, and say, hey, so tell me your story. Tell me your personal story and why we should hire you. You'll see somebody, it's so ironic to see literally sharpshooters, guys who, like Hurt Locker movie, wear full on gear to defuse bombs, come unglued, quite frankly. So we're going to talk about some content that's been helpful for them because it's universal for us. As stress and pressure go up, which is what happens to us when we're in transition, when things are changing, and this is what happens to our kids. When stress and pressure go up, the ability to think clearly and make wise choices goes down, no matter who you are or what the stress is. And we'll get into what actually happens into our brains. So content heavy stuff coming in just a couple of minutes. Stress, pressure go up, wise decisions go down. And typically most of us, when that happens, we tend to make poor responses. We tend to make poor choices. So examples, a lot of us, when we're feeling stressed, will avoid it and try to distract ourselves. It'll prompt a fear or anxious response. Sometimes we'll get into a blaming mode. Some of us might be prone to catastrophizing, like the Chicken Little, the sky is falling, it's all going to be horrible. Some of us, however, get into kind of a fantasy mode where it means like it's all going to be okay. Like it's an avoidance of stress and pressure. It turns into kind of a fantasy. Oftentimes it's impulsive reactions we make. And then I think for most of us, we go into an auto response, kind of auto triggered, kind of shut down, not thinking response. So stress and pressure go up, we make poor choices. And what that leads to, typically for most of us, is we make some poor decisions and we get stuck in patterns. And we don't really want to do that. So imagine for our kids when stress and pressure goes up. And this could be however your kid perceives stress and pressure, something that feels threatening to them. And I'll talk more about this in a minute. but they're ingraining, they're being trained right now how to respond when things feel stressful, when things feel out of control, when things feel scary or things feel overwhelming. They're learning primarily from you and I, from their parents, what an appropriate response is to stress and pressure. Now, that might give you a little bit of pause because where else would they be learning how to respond to stress and pressure besides their primary caregivers, the people they see the most? So I think, and this again is kind of spoiler alert, where we're headed, we want our kids to be able to handle stress and pressure effectively, productively, well. We want them to make wise choices. We want them to respond well. So good choices. It's about being self-aware. It's about saying, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. This is too much for me. Let me take a step back and think what's happening. I'm feeling a little like this is too much. So I'm going to ask for some help. I'm going to get some input. I'm going to try to ask them different questions to get perspective. I'm going to take a step back and think about what's most important to me. What's really happening? What's really going on here? I'm going to think about setting goals. How do I walk through this step by step? And then if you're able to make a good response, if you're able to recognize that you're experiencing stress, and if your kid is, then there's an opportunity for them to make a good response, which will lead to better decisions. So, challenge. Why do I share all that? Because every time we go through a change, we experience a change, there's transition. And every time we go through transition, there's emotion. And every time we go through transition, there's something that's under threat. And it could be control, it could be time, it could be a sense of normalcy, it could be a sense of routine and pattern. I'm going to turn off the slides for a sec. This is what happens. And so, what I want you to think about, you don't have to share. If you want to share, it'd be awesome. But what do you notice about your kids and how they respond when there's more stress and pressure in their worlds? What is a typical response that you see in your kids? Just think about that for a few seconds. Think about each one. If you got more than one, they're probably a little bit different. Some might manifest through physical stuff, stomach aches, headaches, outbursts, anger. Some might shut down and you try to poke at them a little bit. Hey, what's going on? And they just don't respond. And you kind of worry, like, where did they go? Some of them might get really clingy and actually fearful. They might just try to kind of cling to you and you're thinking, no, you're supposed to go back out into the world. You're not sure why. You're trying to kind of shake them off you a little bit. So every kid's unique, but we're trying to recognize when they're feeling stress and pressure. So the idea for your kids to go back more and more into the world, more and more full-time into school, back to teams, back to games and competition, back to performances, back to seeing more and more friends, that actually is an increase in stress and pressure for your kids and for you and I. So how do we manage that? How do we walk them through that so they can handle that really well? Let me share with you a little bit more content, and then I'm gonna stop talking and get your feedback. So stressed. Anyone feeling a little stressed out these days? I'll just raise my hand. Feel a little stressed out. I spent the day. This is kind of suspicious background here. We live in Westwood and Rancho Bernardo, but we're out of town right now. We're up in the mountains, Lake Arrowhead. We went skiing for the day today, and we were supposed to go, all 5 of us go skiing, but last Thursday I was delivering a Zoom presentation to a national foster youth organization. I was 6 minutes in, and I got like 4 phone calls from a number I didn't recognize while I'm giving a presentation in my home office. And I hear the 4th phone call. And I'm thinking, that's weird. Who would call me 4 times? I hear my wife in the other room yell, Kale, our son's name is Kale. Kale broke his wrist and he's down by Westwood Elementary. And so I quickly said, guys, rain check, ran down, saw him on the side of the street. He was riding his bike, tried to pop a wheelie, popped it too far, went back and landed on his wrist. And it was a pretty gnarly, nasty break. And I rushed him down to Children's Hospital. They had to sedate him to pop it back in, to put the bones back together. They wouldn't let me be in the room for that. They said I'd either vomit or pass out. So, here we are today. Fast forward a few days. He's fine. Doesn't need surgery, which I'm shocked about. But he was so looking forward to going to this day. But that also meant that it was me, and we carried on, me and my 2 little girls going skiing all day. I don't know if you've ever done that before, but I was stressed out today. I'm going to sleep well tonight, not only skiing, but trying to manage a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old who've hardly ever skied before. So that's on top of school. That's on top of work. Yeah, there's stress. There's no shortage of stress. So we're just going to dig into a little bit of the difference between stressors, which are the things that kind of come into our life, and our stress and how we respond. And this is going to be, I hope, really, really practical, very helpful content for you in your life, and especially as you engage your kids and walk your kids through this. So just to parse out some words, stressors are things that happen. They're generally outside of us. It could be a person can bring you stress. An event can be a stressor. Something that happens around you, like son breaks arm, or it could be a non-happening. Imagine your paycheck not showing up in direct deposit. That's a non-happening. That is a stressor. It can be an external thing. So someone yelling at you, a boss that's upset with you, a teacher that's mad at you, or it can be internal. It could be a sense of guilt, a sense of I'm not good enough. It's a stressor. Can be a thought that comes up that's this isn't safe, and so your body, that's a stressor. We're not safe here, so stress goes up. Stress is our response, and that's actually primarily a biological response. And I think a really helpful part of what stress is, it's a response that's triggered by a perceived threat. So then this is where you look at, if I've got 3 kids and I see they respond differently to stress. Actually, not only do they respond differently to stress, but their version of what is stressful is different. And you know this if you've been in a relationship or if you're married, that what is threatening to you is not threatening to your partner, to your spouse. It's different. One thing that is stressful to my wife is not, I just look at him like, what are you talking about? But something that's threatening to me, she's kind of like, what are you doing? So stress it's almost like a fingerprint. It's unique to you. And it's primarily a biological response designed to help you escape. Let's get out of this moment. I want to get out of this. So try to put your lens on for your kid for a second, whether your kid's in kindergarten or 8th grade. What feels to them like a perceived threat? Some of your kids might be wired to experience threat by friendship, by relationship, by the desire to be accepted, or to have a close friend, or to feel like you fit in. And especially the older they get and the more their brain shifts and they're aware, more self-aware, almost self-conscious of rejection and the threat to being rejected by a group of friends or peers. Some of your kids, my kids too, will be uniquely triggered by that. Some kids might be more triggered and feel like a threat is more around performance. It's around doing good things, accomplishing things. So a kid that might be particularly activated and have big reactions to feeling behind in school or feel like I didn't do enough. There's something there, and they're having a stress response, and it feels threatening to them. Others might feel like you have a kid that just gets triggered by safety. I know we've had a kid that over the years has struggled with the idea of like there being stomach flu or being sick, and this is way before COVID. So the idea of feeling safe or feeling cautious. So it's designed, and it's a good design to help you escape. Now, what most psychologists would say is that stress in and of itself is actually a productive, healthy thing. Stress is what helps us grow. Stress is what helps us manage our lives. So we try to avoid stress and get less stress and more things that we enjoy and appreciate and need. Stress in and of itself is not bad. Chronic stress, when you put that qualifier, chronic stress, that's when it becomes harmful. And another way you would probably call it, or I would probably call it, would be this term, burnout. I'm feeling burnt out. And the definition was one psychologist's definition of burnout. It's physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or too much stress. And it's when you're done. It's when you've got no more resources. It's like if you ever ramped your car up so high to so many RPMs that it effectively shuts down. It's burnout. And you might have felt that over the past 11 and a half months since this whole thing started. You might have seen this in your kids. This is typically what we would look at for a toddler and see a tantrum. Say there's physical and mental collapse. It's too much for them. They can't handle it. And it manifests itself in different ways. But you know it when they're done, when they're burnt out, when it's time for a timeout, when it's time for a nap, when it's time for a snack, when it's time to come home. We really are no different. The older you get, typically the more we're able to hide burnout and the collapse. So it's primarily a biological response. I don't want to read this whole thing, but if you want to kind of screenshot that or look at this later, this comes from a book called Burnout. Really helpful book. These the two sisters wrote this book. They've been on the Brene Brown podcast. The book's fantastic, very, very, very readable and helpful and applicable. So some of the content here is coming straight from them. But they talk about what happens to us from a biological standpoint when we perceive something threatening. And effectively, if you remember that slide I showed you before, when there's something that feels stressful, the feelings go up, the hormones kick in, epinephrine, our body responds, and there's a fight or flight or freeze kind of response depending on who you are and what the threat is. And in other words, I need to escape. I need to get out of here. It's collapse. And it's a very effective thing, except for when we need our kids or want our kids to be able to have more threshold, more capacity to be able to handle more things. When you know that, especially the older they get, there's going to be more threats. They're going to become aware of more danger. We want our kids to actually grow a muscle of a stress response so that they can handle more. And I'm sure you want that for your life, just like I want it for mine. I want to be able to handle more and not kind of come over the threshold, which is never good. My daughter said the other day, Daddy, you have a serious voice when you're freaking out, and then you have a normal voice. And I was like, oh, cool. Thanks for telling me. I hope I can keep the normal voice more often. So what do we do? This is helpful content for you and for your kids. And by the way, the spoiler is, again, what you and I do and how we model it for our kids will be what they learn. This is life stuff that's not taught through school in terms of a worksheet or content. This is stuff that's caught because they watch you. So the first part of working this out, being able to handle transition well, being able to return to normal well and effectively, being able to handle more. And another word you might use is becoming more resilient. One, we'd be able to diagnose what we're perceiving, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, and then make a good choice, a healthy choice to respond to what's going on. Other way to say it, that we would become more self-aware. Daddy's having a bad day. He's feeling overwhelmed. I'm having big reactions. I have a short fuse because I got a couple emails today that felt loaded to me, felt threatening to me, felt like people are upset with me, or the other shoe's going to drop soon, or I looked at my bank account and saw taxes coming in, or actually coming out, and so the self-awareness is diagnosing, being self-aware. Here's what's going on and the source of it. And then the self-management is, what can I do to respond well so that I can work through the biological response and come back to my senses? to make a good choice. This is what I believe you and I want for our kids, to become more and more self-aware and to be able to know what to do. So I'm going to share with you, and if I'm going to stop for a second, I'm going to share 6 effective strategies, very simple, common sense things you and I can do and show our kids to do so that they can go off in the world and handle more, and they can be better prepared for the next big thing coming. So let me just check in. I just shared a ton. I feel like even my voice is getting tired. And I just want to check in. Questions you have, thoughts you have, ways this is resonating. This might be too much already. We just want to shut this down. We've got about 8 or 9 more minutes. So any thoughts or any questions you got?
This is Linda Mouch. I think you're spot on. I'm just taking it all in.
Cool. Thanks, Linda. That's helpful, especially in Zoom world when you had to talk at myself. It's helpful to get, at least you're still here. That's helpful. All right.
Yeah, I will chime in. I won't put on video, but I will chime in. My name is Shannon, and thank you for this. It was more, I didn't even know what we were doing this for, and I saw it pop up on my calendar. I'm like, oh God, really? So I jump on, and I mean, ironically, I will just share, nervous breakdown over here today with my boss. We've had 3 or 4 people go out on medical leave just this week, which I have no idea why. It could be whatever reasons. But my boss and I were having this conversation of, this is never in our entire careers that we've seen this many people go out. And I don't know why, but I'm guessing because I know I'm feeling it. The stress is just enormous. I feel like the work is more, the kids, the managing. I love what COVID gave us in the beginning of the settling down, the calmness, the let's be together. But over time, I think it has increased what everybody wants to get accomplished while we're at home, including with the teachers, the kids. So I think that this is extremely helpful to talk about the transition, because I don't even know where to begin with that. So having said all that, thank you. Because ironically today, just having my own little nervous breakdown with my boss and going, what is going on? This is, going the same thing of, our kids are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So, and thanks, I should, take my crying, wherever in the closet so that my kids don't see it. So good point.
Or maybe not. So stay tuned. Buckle up.
Okay. All right. I'll listen on.
Thank you. Okay. Let me push on then. So 6 tangible steps we can take. And I gotta be honest, this is the stuff I started working on this content probably 6 months ago. This has all mostly been about me, and I hope it translates to my kids. So Shannon, this will help you at work. And also Eric and Amy, this is a presentation I give a lot to in PD scenarios. So professional development for teachers and staff who are handling more stress than ever. They already have extremely stressful jobs, but way more than ever. So what can we do to manage primarily our stress response is a biological response? How do we respond well so that our body can calm down, that we can give our body signals that it's okay, that we're in a safe place, it's going to be okay, which will enable us and our brains really to start thinking again, to think clearly. And maybe you've had that moment where, I don't know if you're in a fight with a kid or a fight with a spouse or fight with a coworker, and you're just like enraged and you're not thinking clearly, and you're saying things and you're thinking things, and it's just the worst. And then at some point, it's usually 20, 30 minutes later, maybe sometimes for you, it's 2 or 3 days later or 2 years later. And you literally take a deep breath, and something you can almost, I can almost perceive the shift that happens, and I can start thinking clearly again. So the number one most effective, most bang for your buck, if you got nothing else to do, if you don't want to do anything else, you don't want to journal, you don't want to talk about it, the most helpful thing that you can do when you recognize in yourself that you're feeling a stress response, no matter what the stress is from, doesn't matter where it's from. Most helpful thing you can do is physical activity. And you might, like I do, roll my eyes. My gym's closed. I don't want to go out. I hate running. It's so stupid. But research has shown, and here's a good one. Even so, if all you can do is at your desk or while you're making dinner or while you're getting ready for the day, if all you do is literally clench up as many kind of parts of your body, muscles as you can for 30, 60 seconds, even just kind of like even in your car, in the bathroom, in your office, that actually is helping your body work through the stress response. And you're giving your body a signal. No. That was it. That was the stress. And now we're over it. Now we're through it. And your senses will start coming back. You'll start thinking again. Another thing you can do, this is, by the way, this is all like really cheap stuff to do. The second one is to take a deep breath. And if you were to go so far, if you're going to be kind of more deliberate about it, you would do this kind of breathing exercise where you're breathing in to a count of 4, holding it for a count of 4, breathing out to count of 8, or do breathing squares. There's a bunch of different versions of this. The point is to take a deep breath. When you're experiencing the stress, that your body, part of the response is to close in on the respiratory system, close down certain systems, and activate others by intentionally almost overriding that response by taking a deep breath. Your body can come back to its senses. By the way, can you imagine if you had had these 2 tips when you were in middle school or high school or going to your first job or today, Shannon? I mean, you might just want to do that right now if you're muted. Or if you're not, it's okay too. Take a deep breath. It actually changes the chemistry of your brain. Crazy. Third, positive social interaction. Good research shows even a 15-second quick little conversation with the barista at Starbucks, like, I like your earrings, or it's going to be rainy today, huh? Even the slightest, smallest positive social interaction will actually, again, because we're social creatures, our bodies will like realize, okay, I'm in a safe space. I'm with others. There's other people that will get my back. That's actually what's happening to us on a biological level. So remember Regis Philbin, phone a friend. If you're feeling stressed, to phone a friend. This is a part of what our kids have lacked in virtual environment or in a very hyper-controlled school environment, where they're very limited on that social interaction. That's difficult. Also, many of our kids haven't been doing physical activity. I know one of our kids particularly needs to be running every day, like, and getting out of breath and sweating. And we can tell, we can just see, like, chart the graph, big, big freakouts, big tantrums, and day that she got high rigorous activity. Fourth, laughter. So laughing. It's really hard to laugh and feel under threat at the same time. It's like, doesn't happen. Tickling might be the one exception, but laughter. So what makes you laugh? What's the, for me, it's, I do one thing with one of our daughters during virtual school at home. We'll often, especially at lunchtime, flip on America's Funniest Videos clips, which there are billions of them. And within a minute or two, she and I are both laughing. I have a couple friends. I know if I get them on the phone, I'm going to laugh. I know if I watch my show, whatever the show is for you, Seinfeld, whatever it is, laughter, hugging, 20-second hug. Don't be creepy, but a 20-second hug. Actually, again, we're in a safe place. We're kind of hacking our body to say it's okay here. Crying. So these are the top 6. Screenshot that. Teach your kids this. Put this on the fridge. When you're feeling stressed, when you're overwhelmed, when you're burnt out, when you're out of resources. And what you don't see, you might notice, you don't see scrolling on social media. You don't see taking a nap, shutting down. You actually see engaging things. These are all engaging. There's something to do. So energy is being stored in you through stress, and we respond through expending energy. Physical activity, breathing, positive. You have to call somebody, see somebody, say something to somebody, laughing, And these are all intentional, engaging things. 7th one, freebie, create something. Do something creative with your hands, with your words, with your ideas, with friends. Create something. So all of this, it leads towards resilience. And good definition of resilience is the capacity to spring back into shape, to recover quickly. That's what we want for our kids. So I'm going to stop there because I have more content and we're low on time. I want to check in if there's one of those 7 that feels helpful for you or for your kids that you could try this week. What would it be? I mean, this is so kind of coach right now. What's the one thing that you might need to do, or this is just a reminder, or something that you can give your kids? I've been trying to teach my kids to breathe, but it's really hard to do that when they're in a tantrum moment. I've been just breathe. I got to teach them that when they're not activated or when I'm not ticked off at them. So little feedback. What's been helpful? What's something that you want to do in your life or with your kids?
I think maybe for the social interaction, which is challenging these days, just because we don't see our friends as much and under completely different circumstances, maybe instead of looking for that on social media or on my phone, like actually calling someone and talking to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that takes energy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot harder than just like scrolling through Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, for a couple of us, we've been kind of taking short walks
Mm.
at school around our track.
Nice. Like it. Yeah, this would be another workshop for another night, but the what happens to us when we scroll, it's the very similar, very, very, I mean, it's almost the same thing as smoking cigarettes. Like we've learned over the years of like, oh, that kind of dopamine effect that we're looking for and the smoking, we think it calms us down, but it actually has this other response in us. And no matter how strongly or loudly you tell a smoker, it's like, I still want to have that. So there's a very similar thing that's happening. And that's incredibly uncomfortable for me because my kids are watching me do that a lot as a stress response at the end of the day. And I'm just so justified. I'm getting my sports news. I'm catching up with friends. I got some work things that I get to do through social media. So, but if I were honest, I'm like, yeah, this is counterproductive. I remember being on a wonderful vacation or just experiencing joy in a family vacation a few years ago, and then seeing a friend that was in Maui. And I was like, in a second, I was like, gosh, I haven't been to Maui. I haven't ever been to Maui. I can't afford Maui. Heck, man. And then I read this article like an hour later of like, did you know that when you, social media causes comparison and it'll deplete your own enjoyment of what you're experiencing? I was like, oh my gosh, it just happened. Literally this wonderful time, such a fulfillment, a time with my family in Palm Springs, a place I love, but it just took it all away in a second. So now imagine our kids and your kids when they become 11, 12, 13, 14, whenever you give them a phone, imagine them having the same experience, but without the capacity that maybe you and I have to think clearly or to have some sense of perspective. How much more so that becomes ingrained on them. And no matter how much my son at 14 tells me, I don't get it. It's not true. You're so stupid. Your brains don't get rewired. I keep telling him, sorry, fella. I read a lot about that. And it's not good for you.
Scott, do you buy into the tapping? Have you done that?
What is that? I would like to. I'm in anything.
I only caught a little bit of it, but a couple of a couple of classes I've been into, and I've missed the beginning, but they do the tapping and they do positive reinforcement. I don't know, maybe Amy or Eric might know a little more, but they tap here, they tap here. There's like some areas. It's supposed to help bring positive energy.
I'm gonna start tapping everything.
But there's like some areas on your face. Yeah, it's free and it's movement, a little bit of movement.
Yeah.
I'll find out more about it. A friend of
mine. Kids are gonna be like, "What are you doing, Dad?"
Yeah, no, it's just like, classes. I've seen some classes. start like, a couple of
Hmm.
minutes in the
Hmm.
morning when they start, and it's called, I think it's called tapping. I'll have to
Hmm.
get the right thing, but they just
Fascinating.
tap above their eyes, their
Yeah.
temples. There's like some areas
Hmm.
that they tap, and
Hmm.
it goes down to the collarbone.
Okay.
And I can't remember what it's called for the life of me.
I'm gonna Google it. You can send it to me too if you find it, Linda.
Yeah.
I've heard of EMDR. It's therapeutic and it's try to integrating past experiences. It's
Yeah,
very
I've seen
shorthand, but
that.
maybe that's a really rudimentary way of doing that.
One of the things I remember our counselors previously, Amy Sage was great at it, was mindful moments. And even at our all team meetings, starting with that and kind of just let your mind just be free and think about the voice and whatever, she was sharing at the time, and was, you start focusing on a picture or your breath or a peaceful moment in your mind, and just focusing on that. And then that got away or got rid of some of those stressors that we brought into the meeting, and then we can be ready to focus on whatever the task at hand. So that was helpful.
I love it. And even back to my work with the Navy SEALs, there's a whole training component now for Navy SEALs for breath work. So the idea, I think early on, maybe 10 years ago, I heard about mindfulness. I just thought, gosh, I don't know what that is, but that's just not, I mean, I just had a few different ways to kind of, and then hearing about these very tough warriors practicing the same stuff, mindfulness, meditation, all of a sudden I was like, these are very different camps who are advocating using the same practices to clear your mind and get clarity and come back to your senses. I think it's pretty cool.
Oh, let your historian know about that. My cousin is the historian for the Naval SEALs.
No way.
Let him
Cool.
know.
Huh. Fascinating. Well, before I forget, I'm just going to put in the chat, there's videos that we send out twice a week that have really short. So those 7 things we went through, like one of those would be a short little video. So for parents who want more content, and if you sign up for that, I will get your email and then send you the slides from tonight if you just want to grab these slides. And for those of you who watch this recording, no matter when this pops in or when you sign up, I'll send that to you. Anybody else want to share something helpful or something that was helpful for you that we covered? Thanks, Linda.
Thank you so much, Scott. I
Yeah, I
feel
really
like
appreciate it.
Yeah,
That was
good.
awesome. So I just looked up tapping. It's called emotional freedom technique. It's a holistic healing technique that has been proven to effectively resolve a range of issues, including stress, anxiety, and phobias.
I bet it's on YouTube.
It's like an acupuncturist, or I don't know. But yeah, a few Poway Unified School classes do that. It's interesting. A parent had brought it into a class, and
Awesome.
I had just walked into the class to help a student, and I saw them all doing this, and it's like,
what is going on?
That's interesting. What is it? Yeah. So the little things you walk into.
Yeah, totally.
But this is great. Thank you.
Very good.
We definitely try to do, I would say, at least 4 out of the 7.
Good.
We're not very creative. And
Well,
we
thanks
don't like to
everybody.
try.
Thank you for joining. It's good to be with you.
Thank you.
See you in a couple of
for it.
weeks, and I'd love to get your feedback too on future in terms of content. What's most kind of burning, pressing for you, and in terms of format. Obviously, if you were here last time, it was very interactive. This was very me talking. So somewhere in the middle, no, keep talking, or please shut up, Scott from YouSchool. Let me know.
Very good. Thank you, Scott, very much.
Thank you.
Scott.
Take care.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Have a
Night.
good night.